to our Land Bulletin series. I'm Haley Murr, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development here at Murr Ranch Group. For those of you who are just tuning in, this is our Land Bulletin series where every other week we discuss the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics currently impacting landowners. Murr Ranch Group is a full-service ranch real estate brokerage and consulting company focusing on legacy ranches and sporting and conservation properties around the West. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than what we've talked about in the past, but something that's very important to a larger population of people around Denver and a lot of other urban areas. And it's about, we're going to be talking about urban land stewardship. What are local nonprofits doing to protect the open spaces in our backyard, and how you can become more involved in conservation at a local level in places that are important to you just outside your backyard. Thank you to everyone who has submitted a question. We'll try to get them on this broadcast. Please feel free to ask your questions in the comments, and we will try to answer them as many as we can. If not, we'll get back to you after this and answer them individually. Helping me out today is a fan of urban, rural, all types of land stewardship, our founder of Murr Ranch Group, Ken Murr. Welcome, Ken.
Good morning, Haley.
How are you doing today, sir, in this snowy day?
I wore my flannel shirt today in honor of the first snow or second snowfall. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just happy you got in safely in your truck and didn't fishtail anywhere out there.
I'm good. Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm good.
Well, I know this is I know all topics that we go over in this Land Bulletin series are important to you, but this one in particular, because we experience this type of open space probably every day. And our guest today is one of our dearest friends and favorite previous office neighbor, the Executive Director of the High Line Canal Conservancy, Harriet LaMair. So without further ado, here's Harriet.
Hi,
hey
friends.
There, Harriet.
Yeah, we're all here
Hi, friend.
together. Logical challenges, but hi,
Yeah.
Thanks for having me and your willingness to High Line Canal Conservancy.
Yeah, we love what you guys do. I know Ken and I were a big part of our big Dine for the High Line this summer, which was a blast. You guys are, we go to a lot of like barbecues and events like that, but you throw a good party at Harriet.
Well, I just want to say that Ken and Julie and were the chairs, some of the chairs of our event, and you guys have been awesome. Ken watched this project in its infancy in his office across the hall. Really neat to have you guys. Ken lent me books on land stewardship.
I love that. Yeah, we miss having you as neighbors. Now we're kind of downtown, and but it's really awesome just to see where you guys have come from, where you started down on Pearl Street to where you are now. It's really amazing what you've created, Harriet. So we're so honored to have you on here to just talk about what you guys are doing and what urban land stewardship is. So we'll start at the top level. For those of you who are joining in, what land conservation and change of use in an urban setting is. So I guess I'll let you, Harriet, just talk about kind of what that change of use, what we're seeing around the country, and what that means on an urban level. So
the project is a land conservation project and a stewardship project. That's the canal is a 71-mile-old irrigation channel, and we'll get into the history a little bit later. But urban land is in many different ways across the country, and I think one of the really fascinating things from my perspective is the recycling of old utility corridors, and it's an old utility corridor. And you see this happening where urban areas developed, and there's hardly any acres of just wild land. Usually nonprofits are finding slivers of land slight utility corridors or empty lots, to think of how those little pieces of land can be put together to create something more, and the reuse of anything from like the rails to trails movement, in the rail corridors, to reusing old ditches and canals for our communities is what we're seeing. We see it in New York. I think projects is the High Line in New York. That's a raised railroad line that goes in New York City and Manhattan that they some members could see from their apartments and their flats, and decided that they, and now it sees hundreds and hundreds of thousands of users a year. Line sold railroad line and see a slice of nature in the city. They've enhanced the wild grasses and so forth that originally were there. And Buffalo Bayou down in Houston, many of you may know about the stormwater in Houston, and so they've utilized the stormwater drainage through the as an incredible urban park area and a stormwater. And then there's something called the 606 in Chicago. It's a raised railroad. And then another one that I think people have probably heard of is the Atlanta. Again, it was a railroad line that had been sold off, and but quite a bit of the land was still in public ownership, and created a circle around the city of Atlanta where people can go and enjoy, some natural slice of nature in the city. So
No.
that's hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you. For those of you who are tuning in, we've just had some technical difficulties with our audio, but we're pushing through. No, it's really neat just to see across the country what projects are popping up. But I will say, I mean, the High Line Canal in Denver, Colorado, for those of you who are tuning in, if you haven't been on the High Line Canal, you got to get out there and do it. Maybe not today. But I mean, you guys it's 71 miles worth of trail. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of other projects out there, but you guys are preserving 71 miles of trail that connects almost the entirety of the city to one another.
Well,
it's
I'd love
bigger
to
than the
tell
city.
you.
Yeah, it's bigger than the city, right? I mean, I think about some of that urban, you think about works like TPL and other groups that are preserving, little greenways and things to grow food and things like that in parks in cities. This is different in that it's this linear corridor that interconnects people. So, and it's fun to preserve these little spaces. And we've all been associated with some groups that are looking to preserve plots of land in urban. But this is actually a long linear trail that connects so many communities within it. And from an urban standpoint and connection standpoint, I think that's the positive trait. In fact, I think about when I grew up in Indiana, we had a railroad behind ours that was abandoned. And I used to run down it with my soccer ball. That's how I learned how to dribble, right? And now they're converting that into a really cool interconnected bike trail that goes for miles. So it's fun to see how people are, latching on to some of these ideas. And I think it's really brings people out in a different way of just, and you're getting exposed to nature and other things in a different way. So that's what I enjoy about it. And we do use the High Line, by the way, probably almost every other day. I can't say for sure every day, but pretty close to every other day.
Yeah.
And I mean, you were kind of talking about it earlier, Harriet. The biggest difference, Ken was talking about smaller conservation versus the scalability of what you're doing, is it's a public land that is not owned by a government agency to protect it and to preserve it. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of even that component, the difference between that type of conservation and what you guys are doing.
Right. So the High Line Canal is owned by Denver. Important to understand just a little bit about the history of the canal, and,
Yeah,
yet it's managed by all these different agencies, including now a nonprofit organization. And so we aren't trying to own, we're many conservation groups take on conservation, they have a role of touring those conservation properties with the conservation values that allowed them to have, obviously, the tax break. With the High Line Canal, the stewardship that we are doing is in leadership to a varied group of managers to bring more value to the community by coming together. We play a very strong role as a backbone agent, nonprofit, coordinating 14 governmental jurisdictions, Denver water agencies. And Ken knows I used to be a lobbyist, so
God love you.
I think that the collaboration of leadership with to get more landscape scales, probably see this across states where they're coming together. I've seen this and read about it, to try to do more little piece. And here we have, like Ken was saying, little pocket parks, but we have a 60 acre resource that's twisting through the most densely populated, one of the most densely populated areas in the whole West, when you think about it.
Right.
We have over 1 million users a year out on the canal right now, yet without coming together from the public, from private citizens. Think about it, philanthropy coming together. It's the power of the public that brought attention to this resource, other resources, to raise the level of commitment from governmental entities for a slice of land than they were doing alone. I just think it's fascinating to think about the power of together and getting a nonprofit board, and then using that strength of reach, getting the public to talk about their commitment and love and piece of land, using those voices to push elected officials and then their staff forward. Yeah.
And it's amazing. I mean, you talk about the collective and the voice of the people kind of creating this organization, but at the end of the day, this was like your brainchild and you started this, I mean, from the beginning. And I'd love you to just, I'm one of your biggest fans, but just to go into like your background and what led you to starting this organization. Was there a need from the public? Kind of where did you kind of get this idea of starting something like the High Line Canal Conservancy?
Well, I think that we all love so finding open space in this metro area suit, especially once the children came along and being able to bring them places. And so I buy this land of the High Line Canal and the power that it has had, the realization that many people connect with nature in different places. Many people may have had the luck of being out in a vast open space and at fields and fields of open lands. And I did, like I said, I grew up in Alaska. But for many people, the place that they connect with nature is in their own backyard. It's the vacant lot, or as we say, an old ditch, like Ken had in his backyard. And so I was inspired how long the High Line Canal was, and I walked it with my friend Nina Eiten, who was also inspired. And then we connected with a man named Adrian Benepe. And Adrian Benepe, conservation world, was for many years the New York head of, and then went on to be really a founder of many of these public-based land conservancies and urban park conservancy to work for the Trust for Public Land. And he came out and said, "Oh my God, you guys have something bigger, more impact there in Denver than anything I've seen in New York. You got to do it. You got, so I think we really were inspired in that way. I think that barriers has always been something that I've been bringing people together and giving people an understanding, helping them see. I think with elected officials that if you let them and get the credit, if you don't care where the credit goes, it's amazing what you can get done. Is to allow the people that you need to be getting good credit. And I think that's a strategy that inspired me, and I felt that I had a skill in that lobbying, and a true belief that it takes a village to get them thinking big and being bold. I think that seeing this canal around it and talking about the 860 acres being larger than talking about the 14 governmental jurisdictions, people just sort of shake their heads. But then being inspired to know that it could touch the lives of so many people, and it was a legacy, all that sort of marketing around a project, I think is really important, and as well. But ultimately, it was the land, and I think anyone that gets involved with something that they care deeply, inspired by the piece of land themselves, and you guys probably see that in your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do. You know what's interesting though? Even before this all occurred, people are hiking the trail and being on the High Line and really just making assumptions about what it is. And those assumptions, if they're wrong assumptions, right? Until they look into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true of a lot of conservation, preservation. As we drive on the mountains to go skiing, for instance, you pass fields where cattle are grazing, and you think they're always going to be there. The trail's always going to be there, but it takes that kind of spark to go ask more, right? Well, is that really going to always be there? Is that what is happening? How is this managed? Because I think that's really truly it's that process, of really kind of connecting and saying, wow, this may not, somebody else could own that. The people backing up to the High Line could maybe buy it. I mean, it could be splintered into different pieces. So,
right.
I want to call that's the genius part of just questioning kind of thing and trying to understand those things. And I think that's what's wonderful even about the whole conservation preservation movement is, what if that's, you just assume that things are always going to be the same, but they're not.
Right. I mean, I had a totally different, growing up, I had a love-hate relationship with the High Line because I used to do, sprint work for Kent when I was playing lacrosse on the High Line, and I hated it on those days. But I always thought it was just a part of Denver. Like I thought the government was taking care of it, that it would be protected, that it was kind of this just this right of living here, that you had access to it. I never thought that there was a chance that it could go away without someone like the High Line Canal Conservancy taking over and making sure it was managed correctly and preserving, not only the trail itself, but the railroad crossings, the canal that used to bring water from point A to point B. So I'd love just to know kind of what the High Line Canal Conservancy does, Harriet, to make this happen, to protect this space. What are kind of the initiatives you guys do to ensure that it stays in perpetuity?
So the High Line Canal was threatened. I don't want to say it's not threatened anymore because there's still risk now. But the High Line Canal was filled in many sections, and they were being chopped down. That was sold off up north by DIA. Generally, in many communities, ignored. So we have done is we have first, like I talked about already, brought attention to this project, create really deep public engagement that of all of the work. And so through the public engagement, which were a series of public meeting, residents involved all along the community, we created, I think it's really important if someone is trying to do something in a major way, you have to have a vision brought forth by a large group of people and very so the High Line Canal vision respected the varied communities, and the High Line Canal goes through some of the lowest income and most diverse state of Colorado, while it also goes through the most affluent communities in the state of Colorado. So a vision that incorporated the desires of all of those people. And we went, is this what you said, or did you say this? And, a series of meetings. And then from that vision, we created a framework plan. And when I say we, I think it's so important. The funding for the planning was paid for by Denver Water, by each of the local grant funding that we got from the Gates Family Foundation, Good Friends of Land Conservation, Doors Colorado, and private citizens. And so it was truly a collaboration. The framework plan is what landed the types of improvements and enhancements that the High Line Canal, mile by mile. It's a 360-page sort of DAR work, but it's not written in stone. So then we go out, and what we're doing now is we're going and actually designing the enhancements in a deeper way. And when we go into communities, and say Aurora and Northeast Denver, when we go into those communities on the ground with the local residents, it's not like you get to just hold and get 350 people like you would down south in an affluent community. And so we're creating pilots of pause places, activities that might be enjoyed, markings on the trail. So we're creating a series of canal that in total over 15-20 years might total dollars in investment in this resource. But when you consider the number of people that use it, there's been hardly any investment in the canal in the years past. A lot of that is underpasses, federal government for transportation infrastructure money for 4 new underpasses. It can be anywhere from $5 million to $8 million. Then we have bridges. Access is critical. We're doing all these physical enhancements, infrastructure investments across the canal and onto the trail. We're creating trailhead interpretive signage and directional signage, and getting that out on the environmental perspective. We're raising funding for fund, which is a long-term fund that will be used to incentivize local governments to High Line Canal over time, where we'll use $40,000 to get them monitor perhaps the new juvenile trees that are popping up. There's still water now. We haven't talked about the stormwater transition. So anyway, we're monitoring, we're planting new trees, we're watering trees, 24,000 trees over 6 inches in diameter in the High Line Canal. So the physical enhancements, the environmental health, another key aspect of the environmental health and stewardship of the canal is the stormwater transitions. No longer serviceable or functional as an irrigation system. It's being decommissioned by Denver Water, and so we're direct governments and stormwater managers to direct more stormwater into the High Line Canal of environmental benefits. Sort of top line is that water after it's 72 hours, which is what's allowed under Colorado water law, when it leaves the waterway, that water is 40% cleaner than it was when it entered the canal. It goes into a little dry creek or whatever and makes its way to the South Platte. So that's a huge addition. Having water in the High Line Canal, stormwater, provides better, improves the quality of life, the quality of air in our. We've drawn another thing that nonprofit organizations and stewardship groups can do is tell these stories, tell them clearly, and speak more about the value of what they think of as an old utility corridor, with a large environmental group to assess all the High Line Canal, from the vibrancy of the canal. Just as a fact, it can sequester over 250 pounds. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's
people are
amazing.
trying to mitigating hurt island. The cost difference of managing canal, stormwater in the High Line Canal versus building gray pipes and stuffing it underground. It's a quarter. It's considered to be about a quarter of the cost on average. So those are the things I want to mention that really comes down to stewardship, which is your topic, is a huge number of volunteers, people out on the canal, cleaning it up, cleaning up the garbage that manages to make its way into the case, removing brush, getting rid of noxious weeds, and learning.
Julie was just out there. Julie was just out there cleaning the canal.
I know.
Yeah,
She
right?
was totally out there, and it was wet down.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when people do that, Ken, they get it, right?
Yeah, they get it. Well, it's the adaptation of something too, like this canal that was an irrigation canal that years ago, back in the day, delivered water above ground to, the Front Range, and it carried water. And guess what? When it brought water, it grew trees, and it created these wildlife habitat and all that. But when it's decommissioned, right, it shuts down, and what happens to all that? So the stormwater deal was just amazing, but it's also adaptation of use by the public and people utilizing it. I bet back in the day when it came through, you just saw the irrigation trucks and people weren't using it. And now, I was on the upper range and I saw bighorn sheep, and then, and down further, I see people walking their dogs or running or riding bikes. And then other communities are using it as a community area where they get together, and it is a community kind of focused area. So there's so many different uses, let alone the adaptation of the use, which I think is really cool. And I think we always got to think that in any of the conservation or preservation that goes around, you think about how uses will change, and people will change.
Yeah, and the need around them, protecting kind of, we always talk about how conservation helps with culture, too, of these kind of rural landscapes and these farming and ranching communities. And that's that's what the High Line Canal Conservancy is doing too. It's preserving this community, the culture, the fact that High Line Canal Conservancy is talking with those communities and seeing what they want, what they would see this as, what would be beneficial to their use. I mean, it's amazing what you guys are doing. And I think it's also very important, to connect urban land stewardship with the rural land stewardship. I mean, if we teach people how to become stewards of land in their own backyard, it has this trickle out effect of protecting other open spaces and other, private pieces of land and all of that. So it's neat. I mean, you guys educate people a lot too on, what you guys are doing with land stewardship. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of that component of educating kind of the communities you work with, and then, you know, volunteers that you bring in to become these stewards of land?
I think that public programs that we do, the walking the entire canal, you know, that's one of that. So then there's some educational programs that we do, primarily with a group called Environmental Learning for Kids. And then we be ambassadors of the High Line Canal, and they go out and table and share their canal, and then we do the cleanup. So those are sort of the suite of the types of programs that Brianna told me that last year we had over 450 trained volunteers, sizable number when you think about it. And I read that we removed over 8,500 pounds of trash. And so it's all impact of the volunteers goes way beyond like the amount of trash or people that they talk to, because of what you were just saying, Haley. It's that they're understanding that they're having an impact on the land, that then share that with their children and their grandchildren, learn to care for the land right next to them. You know, the acequias in New Mexico, and that they use the acequias, the Latinos and down there, they were not allowed to use that water unless they participated in the cleaning out of the state. So I think about the High Line Canal like that. We have a commitment to resources that we use. And so, yeah, the education through the program, signage, hopefully it'll help people understand the preciousness of canal and the history of water in the West. I think that, and it helps people value the water in a way that they don't right now. And if they can, now was built, you know, through interpretive signage and storytelling, and why it's struggling, it can be reused for stormwater, maybe they'll get turned on in deeper ways that all the society, you know, to do better with our lands. And that, isn't that what it's all about?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of happened with me too. You know, I grew up in Indiana, in the Indiana dunes. From that trails behind our house to the sand dunes we used to play in, it became a national park. So those things, and we had the Save the Dunes campaign. So those things around you mark you for, you know, they make an impression on you. And I think, you know, so many people, while the mountains are close, right? Not everybody gets a chance to get away. So, you know, even for us to walk our dog and go on the High Line and to see the birds and just look at the cottonwoods and see what's going on and the views is pretty amazing. And I think it can touch all different people in a different way. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and that's what that connection is. You try to get it early. If you can get it early for someone, yeah, it's a lifelong commitment. For sure.
Yeah, and there's lots of kids out on the canal.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you kind of caught the bug. I feel like when you were growing up in Alaska, Harriet. So it's neat that you were able to find that kind of your wilderness in Denver, you know. It's cool. And, you know, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on. Oh, sorry. I kind of interrupted you there.
No.
And one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is, you know, here at Mer Ranch Group, we love partnering with nonprofits that believe in land stewardship in any capacity, whether it be land trusts out, you know, in the mountains to our own backyard. And one of the things that people can do to help, and I think this is super impactful, is Colorado Gives Day that's coming up. So we wanted to, you know, bring you to the foreground so that you can kind of let people know how they can support. If you wouldn't mind telling people a little bit about Colorado Gives Day, and then other ways people can support what you guys are doing to bring land stewardship to the masses of Denver.
Yeah, so Colorado Gives Day, a day to remember the impact of nonprofit and on things that you care about, and it's a statewide effort to try to draw giving to nonprofit organizations. You can go to Colorado Gives Day, I think it's .org, Canal Conservancy on there, and there's a portion of funding that exciting. We have a match during Colorado Gives Day that will be there. Funding that comes to the High Line Canal Conservancy is that we do, but I just wanted to write down a couple of things that when people haven't see what it does. So I wrote down, primarily it helps us care, talking about and enhance the High Line Canal. That's the bulk of our work. It also though, we're working with our partners and with Denver Water on the permanent long canal as a vital public asset for years, belongs to Denver Water. Their willingness to engage in this conversation and to consider is very critical, and they need to know that the public is behind our work and our ability to raise funding and get more members. We have a membership program called we have leadership giving, where we love to get to know people of giving, but people that join as leadership givers, we have meetings, learning from them about their passions. The funding that comes in through private individuals through days like Colorado Gives Day, that's more grants, because we have to show a certain amount of grassroots giving, and the grants are critical to some of the large scale improvements going on along. So like I said, we have the Highline Hero program, we have Leadership Circle, we also have some Adopt a Tree. I think I mentioned it to you guys before, so it's pretty neat. Yeah. We put a little on the tree for a little while with a family name, and then we're going to keep an ongoing GIS data families or individuals that have adopted trees and for which people over time.
I love that.
And
I know one of our I think one of our brokers has like a bench. His family, did the Beardsleys have a bench along the canal?
Yes, and when I mentioned walking the canal with Nina Eiton, so we really do have a pretty strong family connection with you guys.
We do,
because Nina is Woody's big sister.
I love that. And I interrupted you before you said the
no,
last
that's all.
way
I was just saying
support.
The most important thing is to recognize the things that you care about and to give to the things that the High Line Canal is there for the canal. And we want you guys interested in this work and care about land conservation to help us do our work. Yeah.
I thought of something really corny as I was sitting here, but that's kind of how I think. But I remember watching the Avatar movie and how those Avatar people, that tree and that sustenance, though, where they got it. And I think, with things like this, and you find your sustenance, you find your whatever your connection, whatever that might be. But that trail for years, when we're all, that still will provide that with that, with all the plans that you're doing, with putting the water back into the canal, to the growth, and having that there. I think there will always be that little lifeblood that runs through, the area. And I think that's, for people that, use it, and gosh, there's a lot of people that use it because I see them. They should, and I think they're more and more aware of what that does and what it does for them and their families, and what it does, for just the overall ecology of living in a city with so many people. So it's just a really cool getaway. But you're right. There's so many ways to give, and Colorado gives, but we'll definitely MRG is definitely pushing the High Line Canal.
I think like the saying that I like is everyone needs a place to connect.
Yeah.
You live in an urban area, you need a place to connect with nature, and there's thousands of people for generations to come. This canal that we all, with you, will be that place. It will.
Yep.
Mhm.
And
No,
I agree.
each person, that's how it's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can all be High Line heroes by giving.
Yeah.
Hopefully one day we'll get our own cape. I know the High Line hero, the cape
Oh, yeah.
is like, you
Well,
live your whole
hey,
life trying to get that,
that's your
but
motivation, the cape, huh? All right.
yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
it's flying your way, you guys,
Oh,
right
good.
now.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
really special. And to all of you who have signed on today, after this, we'll give you a full map of what the High Line is, how you can access it, where you can access it. I have a lot of friends who have moved here over the past couple of years and they didn't know it existed. And the minute I brought them on, they haven't been able to get off. So it is this like really incredible public space that everyone has access to. So we'll give the maps to everyone who's viewing. We'll give a little more of an outline of what you all do, Harriet. But we just really wanted to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us today and for educating people on the importance of urban land stewardship and the projects that you guys are doing. So,
Before we tune off, I want to thank you too, and your family and your business for seriously and with such heart. And Haley, for those of you, Steve is the leader of our first young ditch riders group, which are the people that use canal in trucks and care for the canal. So how's that for urban land stewardship? Thanks.
we're of course. I mean, I love it. It's again, when I was in high school running it, I have a different appreciation for it now. But it's just really incredible. And, people take it for granted and we're just grateful that you came along and figured out a plan to take care of it. So thank you so much for coming on with us today, Harriet. And
Yeah,
Ken,
thanks,
thank
Harriet.
you as
Our
always.
group.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And we'll after this, we'll provide all the information about the High Line, but I'll let you guys sign off. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thanks, Ken.
guys.
Bye.
And thank you for all of you who joined us today. Again, as I said, we will provide a little bit more information on the High Line Canal and Colorado Gives Day. But first and foremost, feel free to visit highlinecanal.org to download the maps and all of those things and to figure out how to support the High Line Canal and what they're doing. And Colorado Gives Day is coming up the first week of December. We'll give more information on that. And if you want to learn more about other types of land stewardship, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website, merranchgroup.com, or give us a call at 303-623-4545. Thanks so much for joining. See you next time.